Welcome to The Last Talk Show. Tonight, Ruben Fleischer, director of Zombieland.
All the way from the island of Nantucket, Massachusetts, it's The Last Talk Show! The Last Talk Show! Hey!
Ruben!
Good to see you.
Hey, thank you. Thank you so much for making time for this.
Absolutely. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for doing this. How are you? Where are you? And what are you working on?
I am in Barcelona, Spain. I've been here for about a week. We're working on a movie called Uncharted, which is based on a video game franchise starring Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg. We're in our I think, 66th day of filming. I was shooting till 2 o'clock in the morning last night. And it's pretty incredible to be making a movie in the midst of a global pandemic, but I feel incredibly lucky that we've been able to work this whole time, and not only work, but make something that I'm really incredibly excited about.
When is projected release?
Well, who knows if people will ever go to movie theaters again, but if they're like anything like the people in Nantucket who are attending your screening tonight, it's meant to be in theaters July 16th, 2021. So in about, I don't know, 8 months or something like that.
I wanted to talk a little bit about Strange Calls. We met doing a pilot that was greenlit at ABC. It sat around for a year. I was very excited you were attached to direct it. It was a mix of comedy and horror. And one of the reasons I love Zombieland so much was you found a way to thread that and do both of those things at once. How do you find that space? And second part of that, any memories of Strange Calls?
I was always a big comedy guy more than I was a horror guy, but somebody told me that the difference between comedy and horror is if it's a horror movie and somebody's walking towards a closet, you would build up the suspense of what's going to happen when they open the closet. And when they do, somebody would jump out and get you. And the difference is if it's a comedy, somebody's walking towards the closet and you don't know what's going to happen. They open the door and then everything falls out and they get hit in the head with the bowling ball. And so it's like that same tension release model. And that in the case of a scare, the release is the scare, that adrenaline of like, oh, and in the case of comedy, the release is the laugh. And so in terms of structure, they're not so dissimilar. And so I had to study up on zombies and horror because that wasn't really as much of my passion as just pure comedy. But I kind of like arrived at Zombieland because even though I had never made a movie prior to that, I was like, a zombie movie? I don't know if I want to do that. And then I kind of realized like, oh, it's basically like National Lampoon's Vacation if everybody else was dead. And so you're just following this family on this road trip, and the kind of wallpaper is zombies. And so it adds stakes and set pieces throughout. And so that allowed me a way into it that as a more of a comedy fan, I could wrap my head around, and just a fan of just classic 80s kind of family films. Like they're so in my DNA, I knew how to make that movie. Right. But as far as Strange Calls, I was so disappointed that we never got to make it because we had talked about shooting it on the island of Nantucket, which having never been there was really exciting to me. And also the peculiar stories that I remember you telling me about some of the people there and how much they overlapped with the bizarre instances of Strange Calls. Strange Calls was kind of about a person who was worked overnight at the police station in a very, very small remote place and had to deal with these kind of like supernatural occurrences. And so I just got really excited at I don't even think Jaws is Nantucket. It's probably Cape Cod, but that's like the closest thing I can picture to where you are. And so I got really excited about doing something in that horror comedy space again, and doing it some places what I imagine is cinematic as Nantucket. And so I was always really sad that we were never able to see that through.
That pilot really was informed by Nantucket as space. Where did you shoot Zombieland, and how did you create an atmosphere for that?
Both Zombielands were shot in the great state of Georgia, in Atlanta. But because they're kind of road trip movies and they happen more in non-specific places like supermarkets and parking lots and roads and other things. It's kind of just an Americana backdrop. The only real specificity was in Pacific Playland being in California and that being the destination, which was very much inspired by National Lampoon's Vacation. We shot Bill Murray's mansion in Atlanta. So when they drive into the gates and they go up to that big house, that was in Buckhead in Atlanta. But we did do a day in Los Angeles of shooting. In one day, we shot them driving across the 6th Street Bridge, which you see happening, and the 6th Street Bridge no longer exists. And then we went to Hollywood Boulevard, and then we drove through Beverly Hills with the cast. And we had like zombies there. If you look in the movie, you'll see a Charlie Chaplin zombie and some other like, you know, people who dress up as different characters on Hollywood Boulevard. And luckily for me, I got to have some friends be in those scenes because I was on my home turf. So some of those zombies were also pals of mine, which was cool. And that was just one day. So we did the whole shoot in Atlanta and then one day in LA. And then in post, I had to go out to to Santa Clarita, where Magic Mountain is. And we shot some plates of Magic Mountain, which we augmented digitally to make them be the sort of backdrop of Pacific Playland and the wide shots. But the actual Pacific Playland was a kind of odd family-owned amusement park in a part of Georgia called Valdosta, which is very close to the Florida border. And I think it was like a kind of on your way to Disneyland. If you're tired and your kids are complaining too much, you can go to, I think it was called Wild Adventure or something like that. You could go to this kind of mom and pop thing. And the funny thing for that movie is that we started shooting in February, and because that amusement park was due to open, we actually shot the entire finale first. So my first 2 days of shooting my first ever movie were Jesse and Amber Heard as the neighbor 406, which we shot in a warehouse in Valdosta. And then for 3 weeks, we went to this amusement park and shot the entire finale, Jesse kissing Emma for the first time, everything that, you know, concludes the film first.
Amazing.
Before they'd ever even done any scenes together. And then we went back and started at the beginning, which is not typically how you should approach filmmaking, but luckily they were all game and we managed to make it work.
Well, and you had done pretty big music videos up to that point, but nothing that big really.
No. I had done very small independent music videos and a handful of like Burger King and McDonald's commercials. I remember Woody being like, I can't believe that I'm working with a guy who's just done Burger King commercials. Like I had done pretty much nothing on a relative scale. I've said before, and it's a true statement, that I had an easier time getting my first film than I did a television episode. Yeah. I had done pretty much nothing. I did a handful of $15,000 short films for ComedyCentral.com. That's what I had done.
How do you deal with anxiety? Walking onto the set the first day, you have to handle this major shoot for 2 days with A-list movie stars.
I guess in order to become a director, you just have to kind of believe it, your own hype a little bit. Like, I think like, you know, when I did my first commercial, I was 27, you know, telling a bunch of grown-ups what to do. Yeah. And I think that's just, it was always a part of the job. Like, just people look to you and you have to be able to step up. And I was 34 when I made that movie, and it was certainly much bigger than anything I'd ever done. But I think if you are clear in what your ideas are and you're communicative, that goes a long way. But the other thing I pride myself on, and I often give as advice to aspiring directors, like, have the humility and wherewithal to know that you're probably the least experienced person on the set, and there's a lot of really talented, experienced people who are there to support you. And if you're brave enough to answer a question with, I don't know, help me, or what would you do, or what do you think is a good idea, it's actually not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength to be able to access and inspire your team and to have them help you. And I think that generally people look to it as a a sign of leadership that you are able to acknowledge when you don't know the answer. And so I for whatever reason have always been a bit of a more insecure person, and or not insecure, but just I think I'm confident in what I do, but what I know, but I'm also happy to say I don't know. And so I
Yeah.
took that tact. I think a lot of first time directors make the mistake of saying, I need to know everything and represent like I know everything. And then they kind of fall on their own, they hang themselves by their own petard or whatever the,
Right.
kind of
Right.
thing
I
you want
love
to say.
I love that you said talking to the grown-ups, because I still feel that way, and I'm like, oh, I'm 15 years old now. I've been doing this a long time, and I still feel like when we go to the set to do our goofy comedy, I'm like, I got to tell all the grown-ups how we're going to do this ridiculous thing, you know?
Yeah. I mean, the reality is like, if you're a director, you make a movie maybe once every year if you're lucky, but more likely 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Whereas like crew members, they just go from movie to movie to movie. So that, my AD will have done, uh, you know, 25 movies in the time that I've done, 5 or something. And the DP on that movie, I remember saying, I've never shot anything with a gun in it. And he was like, well, I don't think I've ever shot anything without a gun in it. Because he had done so many, like J.J. Abrams, he did like Alias and Lost and all these types of shows. And so he had just done hundreds of hours of television and
Yeah.
knew how to shoot things quickly and be efficient. Whereas like I'd done a bunch of stupid comedy shorts and like, so like by being able to say to him, like, help me get out of this. Like, how do we do this like cinematically, but also efficiently? It helped us yield a better result.
Yeah. I was lucky enough to work with him a few times when I was at Letterman, and it was constantly this. He'd always come in with great stuff. You'd give him a bunch of great stuff. He was always game for things, but there were constantly experiences like, it's time for rehearsal. Where's Bill? Oh, he took all the stagehands out for stakes. When are they back? Because we're shooting. That kind of stuff. There's even a movie called Bill Murray Stories. What was it like working with Bill?
First of all, it should be, it's no secret, but like he wasn't the original idea for the character. It was Patrick Swayze, and the idea was that that Woody's character was a huge Patrick Swayze fan, and then he went to Patrick Swayze's mansion, and Patrick Swayze, they go in and it's covered with paraphernalia from all of his films, and Jesse goes, there's like a pottery wheel, and Jesse goes and sits down at the pottery wheel, and then these two arms come around him from behind, and it's like he looks behind him and it's like Swayze zombie, and he's like, "Arr!" And then Jesse starts running and there's like a chase and the whole thing, and then just when Jesse's gonna about to get eaten by Swayze zombie, Woody's character says, "Hey, Swayze," and then Swayze turns and starts running at him, and he charges him and he leaps, and Woody catches him and they do the leap from Dirty Dancing, and then he like throws him into a wall and he says, "Nobody puts baby in a corner," and he kills Swayze zombie, and it was this sequence that we could never top. Swayze unfortunately got cancer. It was like obviously never going to happen with him. So then we had a version with like Mark Hamill and like Sylvester Stallone and a million different like zombie versions of celebrities playing themselves, and everyone passed and passed and passed and passed. And by the time we were ready to shoot the scene, it had gotten to a point where it just become like this old married couple, Bubby and Peepaw, and they walk into the house and it's this big mansion. There's all these photos of this cute old, couple, and our heroes are like, "Oh, they're so cute. This is such a nice house, blah, blah, blah." And then it turns out there's zombies in this old zombie couple. So it had gotten so far that we had actually cast these old stump people to play the zombies. They were there rehearsing with us, and Woody just was like, "This isn't right." Like, my favorite thing in this whole movie was the Swayze thing. Like, we can't give up. We gotta find somebody. Let me make some calls. And somebody said, "Well, Bill Murray's shooting in Atlanta. Maybe you can ask him," because they had worked together on Kingpin, to come and just do a couple days with us. And Woody called him. He was like, "Oh, I just left, yesterday. I'm in New York, and but send me the script." And so we literally faxed the pages to a Kinko's wherever Bill Murray was. He read the pages. He said he'd do it. We couldn't believe it. He came down. It was a day and a half. It was like a dream come true / like, is this really happening? Like, I don't like, it felt like a fever dream, like in a way, like it
Yeah.
was so surreal because he was only there for like 36 hours. And I guess the only real story is, well, two. One is like, whenever I'd go to give him any feedback as a director, he'd be like, "What now, first timer?" Or "What do you got, squirt?" Or like, you know, he'd just like give me a hard time, which was the best. And then the final scene that of the mini montage things that Bill Murray and Woody do was like they were playing beer pong, and they like Bill Murray and Woody decided that they were just gonna do it with margaritas, and they started making real margaritas, and they were both just getting hammered as they were like playing beer pong or margarita pong. And that never made the movie, but it did end up in Bill Murray just tending bar till like 4 o'clock in the morning in that mansion, and all the crew just staying late and just drinking with Bill Murray margaritas till like the end of time. And it was like beyond my wildest dreams. I was getting to work and hang out with Bill Murray, but drink margaritas on the set with him till whatever hour. And then he left the next morning, and I didn't see him again for another 10 years when we shot Zombieland 2. And that was like,
Bill would do that. When I was the head writer at Letterman, I was very young too. I was 25, head writer, trying to keep the show together, talk to the adults like you were saying, or the grown-ups. And Bill would come in and give you shit the whole time, like, "Hey, kid, yeah, kid." But even worse than Bill was Regis Philbin, who was such a pain in the ass and would constantly stand next to you and just go like, "Dave's not going to like that. You sure you want to pitch that? Dave's going to hate that." And it was just like, "Regis, leave me alone." One of the devices in the movie was the rules throughout it, which was such a both funny, awesome, and also like just a great way to tell a story. Were all of those rules in the script? Were some of those found in editing?
yeah, both. It was, I would say probably 80% of them were there from the beginning. And then another handful we figured out along the way or realized ways to call back or whatever. But the reason the movie's so great is because the writers who wrote it are so talented. It was Paul Wernick and Rhett Reese, and they've gone on to write the Deadpool franchise and lots of other great things. They're incredibly talented. And I think the reason that a very inexperienced first-time director was able to get such an amazing cast for the movie was because the script was so good, which I can take zero credit for, but I was just lucky enough to be attached to. And I think everyone just recognized like how special it was and what original way to tell that story that we've all seen a million times of a zombie apocalypse. They just did it in such an original, fresh way. The rules, I think, were a big part of that. So yeah, it's all credits to them and how inventive they are.
Any funny stories from the set you want to share?
It's not a funny story at all, but my favorite memory was like, there's a scene where they're like on a side of the road, and girls have like stayed just kind of ambushed by having their car seem like it broke down, and then they come out of nowhere and they pull guns on them. And I just remember like there was this beautiful light, and we were like chasing the light, and there was these giant, you'll see on the side of the road, there was these giant like hay bales. They're like circles though. They're not like little square ones. They're like these giant, like 8 foot tall or 6 foot tall hay bales. And like we needed to move a bunch of them in time, and the light was going down and everything else. And like I just remember me and Woody together just pushing these giant hay bales like across a field, which probably doesn't sound that crazy to anyone who's never been on a movie set, but it's very rare that an actor does anything other than sit in their chair and then come and perform their scene. So the fact that he was just willing to like pitch in and put his shoulder behind it, and there was just this like really awesome communal spirit that everyone felt. It was, I think, why the movie was good was because we all felt really just excited about it. So me and Woody pushing a giant hay bale through a field was probably just my favorite memory of the movie.
Yeah. I was just going to ask you about any movie magic we should look for as we watch it. Watch tonight. I read about Woody's Twinkies being a creation because he's vegan. Anything like that people, as they watch the movie, are like, "Oh, wait, that's what's happening there."
The guy who is the bathroom attendant or the gas station attendant who ends up getting killed in the bathroom is this guy Mike White, who's the reason I have a career, because he got me a job as a PA on Dawson's Creek. When I was first moved to LA and was broke and I needed a job, and he said, maybe you can get a job on the show I'm working on. And he's since become a really good friend. And so that guy, Mike White, he's also, if you're a fan of Survivor, he was on 2 seasons ago of Survivor, but he's just a really special guy. So that's a fun cameo with a personal significance to me.
I can't believe Dawson's Creek was where you met him. His brand is so much bigger than that. Enlightened was one of my favorite shows.
He's a real genius. But yeah, we all have to start somewhere. And for me, it was getting lunches for the writers at Dawson's Creek.
So this is brought to us by Muzak.org. We support kids' music programs everywhere. We have a segment just called Tips for Kids.
Come on, guys, help the kids out. Go to Muzak.org. No, that's the way you spell it.
Could be tips for kids, how to be a good director, or just tips you would share with your own kids.
As a parent of 2 young girls, I would say it's really important just to respect other people and other people's ideas. And I think now more than ever in the world, hearing and listening to people and not just taking sides based on preconceived ideas is really important. And I think communication is the key always. So cultivating a dialogue with people that you both share opinions with, or maybe don't share opinions with, the only way we can bridge that gap is through communication. So I think it's really important that we just treat each other with respect. We're all human beings. We're in the case of Nantucket or Los Angeles, we're all Americans. We're all just trying to get through it together. So I think respect and communication is key.
It's time for the last talk show lightning round. Last time you went to a drive-in?
Like at a drive-in movie theater?
Yeah.
The last drive-in movie theater, when I was making Zombieland 2 or maybe Venom, can't remember. It was in Atlanta. It's called, I think, the Starlight Drive-In, but it's this really awesome, it was during Venom, this really awesome drive-in movie theater in Atlanta that still plays, first run movies and everything, and it has 4 different big screens.
What was your last great meal?
I'm in Barcelona, so there's no shortage of great meals here, although they did just yesterday close all the restaurants, unfortunately. But we, as a kind of welcome to Barcelona, I took my most core crew members, my AD staff, my script supervisor, my DP, my production designer, out to this private dinner in this chef's house where he told us the story of Spain from the 2nd century BC to the present, with a meal made from each of those eras, and you could only use the utensils that were available that time during each of those courses. It was like an 8-course crazy thing, and he had music playing from so it started with very ancient Roman music all the way up to 21st century. It was one of the greatest meals I've had in my life.
Wow.
But was in large part because of the company, but it was just a really unique and special experience.
Wow, that sounds so great. Two last ones. Last thing that made you laugh.
We laugh all day on set. That's one of the joys of getting to make movies with really talented, funny people. And so Tom Holland, even though probably everybody knows him as Spider-Man, he's like a incredibly funny person, as is Mark Wahlberg. So we've been laughing a lot every day with the scenes that we're shooting. Like last night, he was on a balcony. And each scene, the girl walks out and he's stuck on the balcony, and he's wants to kiss her and he doesn't kiss her. And every time he would do a different thing on the balcony before he came back in, and he knew how much I was enjoying it. So by the end, he just started leaning into more ridiculous versions of what that final moment was. And none of them will ever be in the movie, but I think he was doing it just because he knew how fun it was. And so it just got more and more ridiculous, and I laughed a lot.
And finally, the last thing that made you optimistic.
I just watched this ad from the Biden campaign that, as a father of 2 young girls, brought tears to my eyes. And it was just about vote for her, I think is the title of the ad. And if you haven't watched it, I highly recommend it, because it's just about bringing decency back and having a positive role model in the Oval Office who everyone can look up to, because having a misogynist with really bad behavior and with low respect for women doesn't set the best example for young girls who are aspiring to become whatever they want to be. And I highly recommend watching it. It's powerful.
And Ruben, I'll give you the last word.
No, I just am grateful that people are still interested in watching this movie, and because it holds such a special place in my heart. I met my wife through that movie. Emma my wife worked with Emma, and Emma performed the ceremony for us at our wedding, and it's just a special movie with a special place in my heart.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking some time. I know you're busy. I still hold out hope that one day we'll be out on Nantucket shooting Strange Calls. Who knows?
Well, that's something else. Let's figure it out, Donick.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Good luck with the movie. And everybody else, enjoy Zombieland.
Thank you, guys. Enjoy.